Great. So thanks, everybody. We will start off just introducing the legislative staff that's on the call, and then Carol, and then we'll go through members of the commission. My name is Katie Walsh. I'm the communications director in the House Democratic Office, and I'm lending some communication support to this process. Reggie? Reggie, you're on mute.
Sorry, I stepped away for a second. Did you say something, Katie?
Can you just introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry. My name is Reggie Parson. I'm from the Speaker's office.
And Carol?
Hey everyone, Carol Kelly. I'm a communications and facilitation consultant in the Portland area. Happy to be here with you today.
Thank you. And then members of the commission, if you can kind of popcorn introduce yourself, that would be great.
Good morning. Daryl Newell, Elder, Vice Chief, Indian Township, Passamaquoddy.
Reverend Kenneth Lewis, faith-based representative, gubernatorial appointment.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Keith Bisson, from Coastal Enterprises Incorporated. I'm representing a community development financial institution.
Bruce King, impacted member of impacted community. This is Aurora. She got a little sting, so she's on the call with me.
Morning, everyone. Joe Bitoiwo. I'm a senior policy advocate with Maine Equal Justice. I'm on the commission representing a statewide organization with policy expertise in public benefits programs.
Hi, everyone. I'm James Mile. I'm a policy analyst at the Maine Center for Economic Policy. I'm representing an organization with economic policy background.
Good morning. I'm Molly and Dana, Tribal Ambassador for the Penobscot Nation, and I represent them here. Good to see you all.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Garrett Stewart.
Good morning. I'm Dee Clark. Survivors Speak USA. And my seat is based on housing insecurity, homelessness.
Has everyone introduced themselves from the commission?
I think so.
Yes? My apologies. I was running late from another meeting, so I'm grateful that you got started. My name is Rachel Talbot Ross, and I serve as the current chair of the Permanent Commission. And I'll just ask one more time, all the commission members have been introduced? Okay, so we'll move on to Cheryl Moran, I think, from the Department of Labor, any legislative staff, and then guests. Cheryl, I think you're on the phone.
Yes, I'm actually Cheryl Davis now. I'm sorry that I can't see you in person there. We had it very bad down here in North Waterboro, and I even just got cell service for my phone just about 15 minutes ago. So I'm glad I was able to connect at least. So happy to be here.
And Representative Talbot Ross, we started backwards. So myself, Reggie, and Carol already introduced ourselves.
Okay, thank you. Great. So Does everyone have the agenda? We've sent out quite a bit of material, and we'll walk through all of it. I just want to emphasize that today's meeting will end at 12. It's only a 1-hour meeting. Friday, we will be meeting for an hour and a half to complete our work. Want to make sure that everyone is reminded that we are being live streamed, and this meeting is being recorded. We will not go over our meeting agreements, but you all are aware of them, and we'd just like to make note of them at the start of every meeting. If someone cannot stay true to those meeting agreements, then kindly let me know. We'll take a couple of minutes. We're at 11:12, so we're not behind schedule. Any corrections or revisions to the agenda that anyone would like to make? Oh, not seeing any. We will move on to what we'll spend the bulk of our time on, which is getting an update from Carol and others on the data analysis for our prioritizations. We will open it up for some reconsideration of bills that any of you would like for the commission to consider. Just get a little bit of an update on our timeline once again, and then I know a meeting may have been scheduled for those who are going to help write our final product. So we'll just get an update on that. I think it's best, although on the agenda it says we have questions, any lingering questions or parking lot issues for the next meeting. We'll do that at the very end. But as you know, going through this data, it's an interactive discussion. So please, please, please just ask the questions as they arrive. And I think without any more, any questions about what we're getting ready to do today, I'll just add my thanks to all of you who were able to fill out that very taxing 154 bills priority setting tool, and for all of the hours that you've put into the Permanent Commission so far, just to make sure that you know how deeply grateful your service to the state is. Carol, you want to take it away?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be brief. I know there are a few folks with us today who weren't available last week to get the initial briefing, but I won't repeat everything I said. I think what you'll find in front of you is hopefully matches what was requested by the group. It has there's some additional information here, which I hope you find helpful. So I've provided you with 2 tables and a graph. Reggie also produced two documents. One is the list of 454 bills with bill titles, as you requested. And there's also another spreadsheet that includes the status of what I'll tell you about the 52 bills that show up on the tables and chart that I've prepared. So you'll have an actual status, committee status, for each of these 52 bills that you see here. So basically then focusing on the colored tables for a second, I've prepared 2 tables. Both follow the pattern that we discussed last time, where as you move the grid line, the quadrant breaks, as we call it, out, and basically cull down by ease and impact the bills that would appear in the upper right corner. So the tier 1 bills being the upper right corner, highest ease, highest impact, and tier 2 being the wings of those. Everything in white on these tables is tier 3. So if it does not say tier 1 or tier 2, that means it's tier 3, and that means it's lower left on those quadrants. So I'm going to just quickly screen share, and I won't hold it up there. And I know it's particularly hard when you're running the meeting, but even for everybody else, it's particularly difficult to have a screen share going on. So I just want you guys to see, for someone who hasn't had a chance to open your email, hopefully you can see this is the pattern that your feedback created. And so you can see in the upper right quadrant this shows a quadrant break at 12. And so in the upper right quadrant, you'll see 11 tier 1 bill LD numbers. That's what the data labels are. And in the upper left and lower right, you'll see tier 2. So there's 12 of those. And then all the other bills are tier 3. And so this will align with one of the columns on the table that I sent you. This particular graph is a combination of the responses from the Permanent Commission and legislators. So it's the averages from both cohorts. And this is generally to show this is what the pattern does. And as you move those red lines, which are the quadrant breaks, you're either making your tier 1 quadrant smaller and therefore fewer tier 1 bills, or you're making it bigger if you back those off. And so that's what the tables represent.
Carol, this is Reverend Lewis.
Hi, Reverend Lewis.
Could I ask a question in the midst of your presentation? I'm sorry.
Yes, please do.
So when I look at the scatter chart that you have,
yep,
and I take a look at the priority setting results and the quadrant breaks,
yep,
far left-hand column of the priority results, when I tally up the number of tier 1s and I compare that to the scatter chart, what I'm trying to determine is that the 11 that you show, does that correspond, which column does that correspond to?
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Reverend Lewis. It corresponds to the quadrant break of 12. So it's the third quadrant from the left, sorry, the third column from the left on that table of PC members and legislators combined. That's the label of the table. So I, just so that you could see what it looks like to make that quadrant, that upper right quadrant smaller, I chose, and it was completely random, I chose a quadrant break of 12 to just give you the example of the chart. But again, those red lines are completely movable because this is about the pattern, not the specific data points. And we'll talk a little bit about how when you strip out the legislators' input, how the pattern is different when you're just comparing what you folks have put out there. But thank you for that question, really important. So you should see, going up by that third column of the page, the table that says quadrant break 12, tier 1 equals 11, tier 2 equals 12. Thank you, Reverend. Any other questions, just overarching, what the heck are we looking at?
Carol, this is Rachel, could you put up screen share
yes,
the color coded, we called it a snapshot, but you have all of them in one place. Can you screen share that? I just want to make sure folks, you were sent a lot of information, so if anyone's having difficulty accessing what she's working from, could you put that up, Carol?
I will. I apologize. I didn't have that queued up here, so.
I'm sorry about that.
No, that's no problem at all. Let's see if I can get this quickly. All right. So I'm going to screen share this. We'll see if I can make the technology work. There we go. All right. So this is page 1 of the 2 pages of the table. And that's actually, Madam Chair, should I keep going in terms of just describing what we're looking at here?
Yes, please.
Okay. So this is page 1, and this is the Permanent Commission members and legislators combined. So these are the averages of ease and impact. And as you move the quadrant breaks, which of these bills result in a tier 1 upper right quadrant or tier 2, which are the 2 wing quadrants. Everything that's white is a tier 3. So in this case, the third column over is your quadrant break 12, and this is the alignment with the graphic depiction that I gave you, the scatter graph, and that was Reverend Lewis's question. So what we're looking at here then is as you view these big picture, you can see the pattern as the quadrant breaks are smaller. So on the left column here, the quadrant breaks at 11. As you move those quadrant breaks out, further out on the grid, so out to 12.5 in this case, you can see how you get fewer and fewer and fewer tier 1s because you're eliminating, you're culling out. And the same is true for tier 2s, you're culling those out. So the table itself, more tier 3s, or in this case, the white cells reveal. And that shows the bills that have the most staying power, I would say, in terms of the ones that hold at tier 1, even as you move the quadrant breaks further and further out. So, so those patterns are the important piece. And the other page, this is an important section as well. So on page 2, I stripped out the input from legislators. And you can see that the pattern is slightly different. It's not completely different. And many of the bills, most of the bills overlap, but there are a few where you'll see that when you compare the two tables, in a couple of cases, the Permanent Commission has flagged or ranked bills that show up as tier 1s and 2s that do not show up at all when legislative input is included. And the same is true in the opposite, which is that the Permanent Commission and legislators combined produce some tier 1s and tier 2s that don't show up when you strip out the legislative bills. And I'll just give you a couple examples down at the bottom of each table. And let me just scroll here so you can see this. So now we're on the Permanent Commission only. You can see that down at the very bottom here, LD 2109 and 2118 are both completely blank, meaning they're tier 3s in the Permanent Commission's averages. But if you scroll up, if I scroll up to show you those same bills when the legislative input is included, you'll see that both of those bills are not only here, they have quite a bit of power. They score relatively high. So a couple of these do pop out as being different between the two, but I think you'll also see there's quite a bit of overlap. And that may be one way that you decide to approach your culling process, is where do we see the bills, which bills have the most staying power in and of themselves as you move the quadrant breaks, and which bills have a lot of overlap between Permanent Commission and legislators. There's a lot to consider, but hopefully these charts will help you cull this down and streamline your process and thinking.
Yeah,
I'll stop there.
Thank you, Carol. So I want to check in and make sure everyone is good with moving on. Any questions at all? I think it's really illuminating between the Permanent Commission and the full committee. And thank you for the examples that you gave us, Carol, because I think this is part of our decision-making process, right? So one question is obviously, what is the quadrant break? Right, so we have to decide where the quadrant break is. And then the other is, to what degree are we looking at the full committee's considerations versus just the Permanent Commission? And we may be able to isolate where, in real specificity, where the most acute cases of that difference lies, the two that Carol gave us. And I can give you another example. LD 1050 is a bill that the Permanent Commission all gave tier 1. It is to mandate the study of African American history and the history of genocide in K through 12 education in the state of Maine. It's already passed the House and the Senate, and it's waiting on a $9,000 appropriation from AFA. That is a tier 2 for when you add legislators in. So that's just a very simple example of what we're talking about. And so again, there's a question around the quadrant break, and then there's a question around, if we take to what degree do we want to isolate those bills that are really very much extreme for the full committee versus just the PC? Yeah.
Madam Chair?
Yes, please, Reverend Lewis.
Thank you. I guess throughout this process, I viewed the full committee as being kind of consultants to the Permanent Commission. Once they have completed their work, it's squarely and purely within our purview of what we want to do with that work product. And I think it's the deliberations of the Permanent Commission as to what ends up in our final report. We can take advice. We're not looking for advice and consent. So that's kind of my perspective. I'm very appreciative of all the legislators, all the time they put in to it. But when there is a conflict, I think the Permanent Commission speaks for itself. And I'd like for us to hopefully act accordingly. Take the information, take the suggestions of the broader committee, but then as a commission in our deliberations, excuse me, they're cutting trees. You get the sense of what I'm talking about. So thanks.
Other folks weigh in, because I would agree with Reverend Lewis.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that 2094 was a tier
Yes.
1 for the Permanent Commission and a tier 2 with everybody. It's essentially the only tribal bill that we're really looking at. So I thought that was interesting. And the way that I thought this through is it was sort of an exercise for the legislators to start looking at everything through a lens, you know, that is sensitive to racial equity and all of that. So I think that their work was overall pretty good, and that hopefully it plants that seed that they're going to start looking at everything with a tinge of this awareness now. But yeah, I would thank you all for keeping the Settlement Act bill high in your rankings, and I think that's a pretty crucial one. And I was confused that it dropped to tier 2 with everybody.
Yeah, I just want to give some voice to it as well. I would echo what you said, Molly, and I thought universally that was whenever I've thought about these bills, I've always thought that 2094 was probably the bill that would define this the most, our work the most, out of all the 450 bills. So it is very interesting. Yeah. Other examples that folks noticed or? Okay, so we have some decisions to make. And so we cannot go to the next stage without making these decisions. I do want to ask, because I want to ask if there are some bills that are missing. Well, I wonder if that's even the best move at this point. I think we need to make some decisions about what the quadrant break is going to be. And then we can look at what bills are there for the Permanent Commission and subsequently for the full committee, and what may be missing, so that anything that you want us to reconsider can be reconsidered at that time. So let's make some decisions. I'm just going to pick on folks because you're all being very quiet this morning. And I'm going to go to our go-to data research guru from MESEP, Mr. James Mail. And if you could help us think about this, James, a little bit. The quadrant break, what?
Sure.
Think about this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, at the risk of like overturning the apple cart a little bit, I had been thinking it when I was thinking about this over the weekend and the last couple of days. I was thinking, you know, I'm less inclined to sort of take like a quadrant break and just list all the bills that appear under there in tier 1 and 2. My inclination was more towards like, now we've got this, you know, effectively using like the most generous quadrant break we have, like, what is it, 54 bills or something like that, using that as kind of our short list, and then sort of as a commission thinking through like what are the, I mean, I'm inclined to think like what are the 10 bills that we would want to recommend that we think will be most impactful, and just present a list like that because it'll be shorter and more manageable as a package than having sort of the 50 bills in 2 different tiers. And I think I'm inclined to use the tiers and the quadrant breaks kind of as a guideline, but not necessarily like a hard and fast rule. Just because I think there are, if we do that, we might end up, I think there are some bills on here that where the impact is potentially like fairly small, but were really easy, and so make it into the tier 1, or even tier 2 instead of tier 3. But I don't necessarily, I'm less inclined to include those, I guess. So I don't know. Obviously, those are only my thoughts, but that's sort of where I'm sitting with it, is sort of taking this as like a short list and then seeing if we can come to a consensus on like a smaller number of bills that we pick from this that we want to make like our top recommendations.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Reverend Lewis.
Yeah, I appreciate James just shared a shorter list, but also this is the opportunity for include some lived experience in the review, as well as the constituencies that we represent. I know in a private conversation I had with you, I have a real strong desire to share whatever shorter list we have with the faith-based constituency and talk about it, understand where their social and racial justice related thoughts and mindsets are once we get to a manageable number. But this is the really opportunity for us as a commission to incorporate that lived experience piece of our assessment as well. And so whatever it takes to get to the manageable number, I'm prepared and willing to do, so that I think the engagement can happen with the various constituencies before we make our final report.
Yeah, I will pick on Joby now. I think that's what Reverend Lewis just said is pretty consistent with the work the effort that you're making to try to share that, maybe those 50 or so bills with constituents in the civil rights and social justice advocacy community to get information back to see if we've to add in factors like lived experience and impact. Is that about right, Joby, that you'd like to also have the time to share that with some folks and bring that information back?
Yeah, that's right. And I do feel inclined to start with a somewhat larger list, meaning not kind of choosing a quadrant and therefore knock off like a bunch of bills that we're looking at right now, because this process, because of how fast it's been, we haven't had much chance to like actually talk about many of these bills. And so there's a lot of nuance to some of them. And James touched upon it when you mentioned some of them might not have the biggest impact. And I'd like to hear more about that. And so that's why I'm feeling like I wouldn't want to just lop off a bunch of bills right now, or at least not after a little bit more discussion about them.
Yeah. Any other thoughts about this? So what we're doing is we're kind of moving into a decision around the use of the quadrants and being able to now take the list, and I think we're talking about the 54. Is that right? Right, Joby, the 54. So to take the list of bills and to be able to now talk about them with constituent groups and each other about their value. So we've now gone from 454, is that right, Carol, down to 154, and now we're down to about 54 bills that are on the full committee's list within tier 1 and tier 2.
That's correct. It's 52 actually that you'll see on these tables.
Okay. Yes.
Can I ask, Madam Chair, sorry to interrupt you. I just have a question. Is the 52, Carol, can you just remind me, is that still somewhat arbitrary based on a the quadrant break, or I support what James is saying. Are we still being a little bit arbitrary about that? I like the idea of having a narrower list, and then, as Reverend Lewis and James said, narrowing it down even further. I'm just curious.
I would agree wholeheartedly that this exercise is a process that gets you to a narrower list. It's definitely not intended to be a hard and fast cutoff of inclusion or exclusion. It's to really reveal patterns more than it is to say yes, no. So 52 is arbitrary in the sense that I created quadrant breaks based on semi-round numbers. I used, 12, 12 and a half, 13, 13 and a half, 14. You could move those anywhere and change the total number that fall into the bucket. So yes, arbitrary. The guidance was get close to 52. And so this was, get close to 50. So 52 was.
I only asked just to make
close.
sure if we're missing other bills, I guess that I don't want to open up that can of worms. There's so many, but thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Helpful.
So where would you all, it's 11:37. I think we've got to make a couple of decisions before we close. So our folks, I'm trying to help get a decision out. If James, the 52 are still based on a quadrant break. So again, we can either take the whole 154 bills that weren't broken into quadrants and reveal that to constituents and try to come back with something we can take what Carol's already prepared and do presentations with that, explain to folks the quadrant breaks in tier 1 and tier 2 or tier 3. We can just agree to the 52 right now and use that to get feedback from folks and work from that list down to a reasonable number for 10. Yes, Keith.
And are those 52 are what those are the commission's bills, not the combined legislators and the commission?
Those are both. That's the full committee.
That's both. Okay.
But the 52 is still based on a calculation.
Yeah.
It's still based on a quadrant break. So we would have to agree on that's the quadrant break and the full committee to filter. James, you were going to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, for all that I said, I do think having 50 or so, it feels like about the right number. So I'm happy with that as the break that we work from. I mean, if for some reason there's some bill that got left off there that people feel strongly about, we could always make a case to add it back in. But I feel like this is a good starting point. It's a more manageable number.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Reverend Lewis.
I just want to be clear as to what I'm hearing. Are we contemplating the 50-odd bills that are the full committee? Are we, so we're including those in which the legislators, and with all due respect, disagreed with the commission, and we're still going to vet those?
Thank you for the question. We can make that determination now, but I believe what I heard from other members, Joby, and that to take the 54 and to vet that through lived experience and impact, and then to bring that back conceivably Friday. So we're now taking the 54 and we're moving it down to a certain number based on those two factors. And then we can see where the permanent commission and the full committee disagree. But yeah, we were talking about the full 52 to vet with constituent groups. Yeah.
Just one more question, and I'll pause afterwards. Maybe can I direct it to Carol? I want to get a sense for, Carol, and I didn't have an opportunity to count that when you take the permanent commission assessment corresponding to the 52 from the full committee, how many bills are in tier 1?
Thank you, Reverend. If you, looking at the table, the second page of the table, in the blue header of the table, you'll see for each column the tier 1 and tier 2 counts. So in the first column where the quadrant break is at 13 for the permanent commission, you will have 39 total bills in play, if you want to call it that. 24 of those are tier 1 and 13 are tier 2. So if you're stripping out legislative input, a quadrant break of 13 gives you 39 total bills that the permanent commission has raised to either tier 1 or tier 2. And you'll see those counts in each of the blue boxes above the headers in this table.
So it's 39 versus 52.
It's true, yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
So 1142, does that feel like a reasonable step forward, is to take the full 52 between now and Friday's meeting, and getting, you now have a list of the titles, so you take both the titles and this and the 52, and Garrett Stewart, who's online, get that out to, you know, the unions. Dee, you've got an organization to vet it. Does it seem too overwhelming? Do you want to stick to just the permanent commission? We just need to figure out what, between now and Friday, what is the list of bills that we will then go through and discuss. Friday starts a discussion about these bills, right? There may be some that we can just all agree go right off the top, but and I will say that I'm noticing a couple of LD numbers that aren't on this list at all, that I will ask for you to consider.
Madam Chair, I noticed that LD 608 isn't on there.
Yeah.
And the unions were really pushing me to try to get that through because of the union jobs. I mean, I know the I know the problem with the prison, and you know, but I'm gonna have a hard time.
So you said LD 608 or?
Yeah.
So that's
yeah,
the down.
LD 6. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Representative. Yeah,
No,
I have an update from the Criminal Justice Committee. I know that they've concluded their meetings already, and I think that's one of the bills that they're going to let die in committee. Yeah, so that's the update that I have from that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, because it's kind of my laptop's kind of freezing.
Oh, no, that's okay. No, LD 608, the Criminal Justice Committee, they wrapped up their committee meetings for the 129th last month, and I think that's one of the bills that they're going to let die in committee and take no action on. So that's the status of where that bill is. But I can double check to see if there are any thoughts you would want me to share with the chairs about that bill.
So
please, Garrett. One of the things that thank you for this discussion, because one of the things that had just occurred to me is, Garrett, thank you for 608, because there's another example that is in the tier 1 for the permanent commission, which is 1907. And that is a tribal bill around the Tribal Law and Order Act that is ranked fairly high for the permanent commission. That bill is not going to come out of committee either. That was a decision made by the tribe. So maybe, Carol, one of the one of the first things we can do with the 52 is figure out what their status is in the committee, because we don't need to debate the bills that won't even have a vote, or back to our conversation. I think the last time we were together with Reverend Lewis making the point, if a bill is already ought not to pass, or if it's a bond bill, I mean, whatever that kind of questionable status is, maybe what we do is run the 52, Reggie, right through a filter that looks at their committee status, and then we've got the list of bills for us to.
Madam Chair, if you want a motion on that one, I'd be happy to make it. I'd be happy to make it.
Let's move
I like
that motion.
filters.
Thank you, Reverend Lewis. You want to move the motion?
I will move, since we have 13 minutes left in our meeting at the chair's request. I'll move that we would send those 52 bills through a filter to include committee status, in order to provide the Permanent Commission with an update or a smaller list, if that's the proper motion.
Yeah, the only friendly amendment I would say is and fiscal
Fiscal note.
Understand fiscal note. Yep, that's been moved. Can I get a second?
I'll second that.
It's been moved and probably second. Discussion, and I see Reggie, did you want to add something to this?
Yeah, before you make that motion, because there's so much information sent last night, there should be a spreadsheet listing where the committee status is. So for example, if a bill is ought to pass as amended, versus ought not to pass, some of those committees have reported out already those reports. And I know a judiciary, for example, I think tomorrow will finish up some work on a couple of other bills, but and I don't have a status on those. So there is somewhat of a filter already as to where those 52 bills are. But I'm more than happy to filter them again to see if they have been reported out or will be reported out, if that helps.
Yeah, and thank you for sending that to us. What I think we're moving towards is just one slightly different version of that, which is to take just the list of the 52 and to remove all the ought not to passes, and to remove those that are not going to be voted out of committee, like 608 and 1907. Just remove them, so that now we get sent a list, just one list of those remaining bills, of which we can look at. Most of them are ought to pass as amended, or and a minority report of ought not to pass. So we don't have to play left here, but we do need to just take the stuff right off the top that doesn't require any thinking by anyone, because it's legislatively, it doesn't have much possibility.
And just
what we're talking about is it's just a standalone document with some of those things removed, and now you're just looking at one document. You're not. Does that make sense to everyone? To Reggie? That was your motion, Reverend Lewis?
Yes, they're cutting trees out there still, so from the storm. But yes, that's what I was hoping that we would end up with, is a smaller list that we could then vet with our various constituencies.
Does that work, Reggie?
Yeah, it works. I just want to make sure that I know, because I was looking through them last night, is that majority minority ought not to pass. So I don't want to accidentally cut out a bill that still may be reported out, but has that minority report of ought not to pass. That is okay to keep among the list, correct? I just want to make sure. Okay.
No, that's definitely okay to keep on the list. It's just those that have unanimous ought not to pass, or
got it.
Yeah, or will not be voted out of committee, like the two we've mentioned this morning. Does that work, Carol, in terms of next steps? So we are still in discussion. Is everyone prepared to take a vote? All those in favor of this motion?
I just want to say one thing.
Yep, no, please. Dee, please. Yeah.
I'm ready to vote, but I just need to voice this. It's a teeny bit disappointing that there's such a difference between the permanent commission and the legislators in some of the bills. And it just leads me to think, are they sincerely looking at the bills, trying to see how it impacts African Americans and tribal folks, or it's just a good bill to them? You know, like the majority who is gonna assist might not be us who we're here for. I don't know that because there's a lot that goes into a bill. So that I'm just stuck on. And I want to look at every bill that we liked that they didn't go for and try to understand it. So I just want to put that out there. That is a disappointment to me, but it might be because I don't have the knowledge of all these things have to happen for this bill, which could have happened if there was more discussion around the bill. Just putting it out there. And now to go about lived experiences. So from now to Friday, for me, for an example, to be with my folks that are from Homeless Voices for Justice, from Survivors Speak, okay, by Friday. It's just very interesting. I'm not an organization that has a lot of administrative assistance. I can easily jump in with Maine Equal Justice and others because we're attached to them in a way. But I just want to put it out there that the things that I became interested in and could share with my groups were bills that we could understand how they impacted us or how they impacted anybody that was not white. And that's where I'm coming from. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving voice to that. Absolutely, absolutely, right on. And no, you're understanding everything just the same as everybody else, Dee. No, you've articulated it quite well. It is disappointing, yeah. I think Molly and Ambassador Dana was alluding to that as well in her remarks earlier.
And if I can actually give, and so this is a weird situation, but if I can give voice to it in a different way, you know, I'm looking at the rock, just a second, Speedy. I'm looking at the rock star of all this, which is 1492, which in its original form, I was a huge fan of. And I've seen it transition into what it is right now. And I don't think that it will help people of color in the way that it would have in its original form. And so that's incredibly frustrating. But, you know, I do think it would be a win to see it go through. But I also want to give voice to the fact that it probably looked better optic wise to a lot of legislators and a lot of people who hadn't been following the bill because it wasn't their committee, it wasn't their specific focus, and didn't see the way it has been transformed. So yeah, I feel the same frustration. Even with a bill that looks like it's going to pass, it will likely make the cut. And like I said, it's not a bad thing, but will it specifically help? It will help people who are impacted by specific small amounts of opioid use. Will it necessarily help populations of color? At this point, no. It's not going to have that impact. Hopefully, incremental changes in that direction, but not in this incarnation.
So I'm going to take the go ahead, James, please.
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to drag this out too much longer. I think I would just say in response to what you were raising, Bruce, which I think is a really good point, that we should make space for whatever report we're putting out. If there are, I think we should feel free to add comments like that to bills that we're recommending, and that could be part of our commentary is, you know, we recommend this and we would have, you know, it would have been much better in its original form. I think we should feel free to say that.
So let's take the vote and then we'll keep this conversation going because we've moved just a tad bit further than the motion. So let's vote on the motion and then we'll come back to this discussion. All those in favor? I didn't see Joby.
I still have a question about it. I'm not clear what the motion is. Is it just getting rid of bills that have a unanimous committee on not to pass report or a very lopsided one?
No, that was not my motion. And I don't mind restating it. It was to, of the 52 bills, that we would send those through the filter of ought not to pass, no report from committee, fiscal issues, in order to cull the list down from the 52 to something a bit more manageable.
So do we do the culling after looking at the results, or does the culling happen automatically?
I think if we take of the 52 that we have, which have already been reviewed and assessed and ranked, then take it one more step, which Reggie has already did to some extent, and then provide us with a list of that ought to pass bills, reports out of committee bills from that 52 to whatever that number is going to be. And if I could just continue, that doesn't necessarily lose the other ones. It just gives us a smaller group to review with our constituencies, because the commission and commissioners can bring back any bill that they want to for discussion. I don't think that has changed, but I don't know if that helps Joby or not, but I know that Reggie has provided us a document that has the committee status of the bill for everything that we had prior. And it's now to take that list based on the scatter chart of the full committee and superimpose that to get the smaller numbers. We don't have a document right now that takes the ought not to passes and no committee reports off of that larger group. I'm sorry, the background noise.
Okay.
So
The way I'm understanding it, the current spreadsheet that Reggie provided, we could quickly identify which ones are ought not to pass, correct?
So what we're, if you don't mind, so what we're doing, Joby, is we're taking a vote where we're asking Reggie to take the list of 52, and Reggie will remove those bills that have a unanimous ought not to pass. They're not going to the floor, right? These bills, and he's going to remove any bill that's going to state it's not ever going to be reported out of committee, like 608 and 1906. It will die in the committee, right? It's not being moved. He's just going to take any of those bills right out of the 52 and provide us with that list, because it doesn't make any sense for you to go talk to people about a bill that has a unanimous ought not to pass. It's just
Madam Chair, and I think that's my point. What I don't want to do, we don't have much time, and I don't want to have conversations with the constituency on bills that absolutely are not going to be part of the legislative process for the 129th session because of the amount of time that we have. And I want to give a full vetting for those that the commission has ranked high, and so that our work can be done and done with some level of integrity with the constituencies that we represent.
So one last piece before we take the vote, Joby, is just because a bill has a divided report, it's still on our list. It's just the unanimous ought not to pass and those that won't come out of committee. So it may remove 5 of them, or 6. But that's what the vote is on. And I just wanted one other clarifying piece, and that is we'll start the conversation on Friday. Remember, we were going to talk about our timeline. The timeline is in our hands. So to Dee's point, we're going to start this conversation on Friday. You don't have to have vetted all 45, 49, whatever that looks like. You don't have to have vetted all of those bills with your constituencies by Friday, but we're just going to start to talk about each bill and get the status in committee. Think about its fiscal impact. Think about so like what Bruce just modeled for LD 1492, we're going to start that process on Friday. We won't finish that process on Friday. So Dee, you don't have to have done all that vetting in 48 hours. Does that help, folks? And then the third point is any bill that's not on this list that you want to fight for, we get to do that throughout this whole process when we start on Friday.
Yeah, I see that Ian is not here, and he had submitted some notes in that vein. So hopefully we can bring that forward.
Yeah. Is everyone ready for the vote? And I thank you, Joby, for asking the clarifying question. Thank you. All those in favor? I'll just see your hands one more time. Any abstentions? Any opposed? Let the record reflect that that was a unanimous vote. And Reggie, we thank you for that work around the 52, maybe working with Carol around the 52, and then getting us that shorter list as soon as possible so that we can then start vetting that with our constituencies. Does that make sense? Isaiah, did you have your hand? Did you want to say something?
No, I was just there's wind blowing in the microphone. I was trying to like, cover it up, so it didn't. Everything sounds great.
Great. We are at 12:02, so we are at time. I think we did make one great decision to move the process forward and get us in a good position on Friday. You do have now a list of all the bill titles. Reggie will send us out the called list that we're working from now. And then I just ask you on Friday to come prepared to talk about some bills that you really are passionate about. We'll just go through them. We'll start, and bills that you don't see on the list that you'd like to fight for. So anything else before we end? If Katie, yes, please.
Sorry, I did just think of a quick question. All right, will we be receiving that list, and then that as it is can be shared with our constituents, or should we like, is that just how we'll all share like similar lists, or should we cater them?
No, that's a great question. The list that we're going to get from Reggie and Carol now will be the list that you can share far and wide. Yep,
Okay,
and
thank
get
you.
feedback on, and bring all that feedback with you if you get some feedback, like what Garrett did with LD 608.
Okay.
So Katie, I just very quickly before we end, I wanted you to give voice to the final product. Is there just a quick update on that? Is there a meeting?
So as decided at last week's meeting, Garrett, Joby, and Isaiah have signed up to be the report writing subcommittee. We're actually going to meet at 4 p.m. Hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I got one of those unstable connection notifications. But Reggie had pulled together some sample reports that I've sent to that subcommittee at 4 p.m. today. We will meet. You know, my role is really to listen to what they want this report and on behalf of you all to look like. So we'll start that kind of style and formatting and messaging conversation today. And then we'll continue as we refine the actual recommendations to fill out the report and build it out with all of the information that you put together.
Well, thank you very much for that update. Anything else that we need to discuss before Friday at 11:30?
I just have to say I'm at a training until noon, so I'm going to be hopping in a little bit late.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that notice, Bruce. And once again, we just want to.
Madam Chair, I did indicate that I would not be available on Friday, unfortunately. So I just wanted to let the commission know that I'm unavailable this Friday for the meeting.
I am as well. I'm in the same boat, Madam Chair. I apologize to everyone.
No worries at all. Thank you both, Reverend Lewis and Keith, for letting us know about that. Katie can make sure that you get a record, that you have access to the recording of the meeting. And then we still need to determine what our meeting schedule will look like moving forward. So you'll get some notification about that. I'll check in with Megan Rochello to see where we're at in terms of scheduling. I did forward to each of you the notice that came out from the legislature that they are polling legislators to see if we could meet, not next week, but the week, I believe that starts the 17th. So once we know what that polling looks like and the likelihood of a date for special session, we can adjust our time frame accordingly. Just last but not least, I'll give big thanks to Reggie, to Katie, to Carol, for holding us so tightly together, and Megan, who I don't think is on this call, and Eric, but Permanent Commission is very grateful for the work that you all are doing. You're holding us all together. You're keeping this process right tightly moving forward, and I know the bulk of the work is falling on each of you, and we couldn't be more grateful. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I just need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, it was moved by Dee Clark and seconded by Bruce King. We have a motion to adjourn. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion. All those in favor? Yep, we are adjourned. Have a great couple of days. See you on Friday. Bye-bye.
Everyone, thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.